The classic MG Roadsters brought the joy of driving a lightweight, agile car to millions of people around the world. It was a car that handled well, felt like it was going fast, and gave its drivers more fun for the dollar than anything else on the road. MGs continue to deliver the promise of affordable fun. You don't need to be wealthy to tackle the open road in an MG. MG stands for Morris Garages, the Oxford distributor for Morris cars. Cecil Kimber became its general manager in 1922 and started modifying Morris Cowleys, lowering the chassis and fitting them with more sporting bodywork. The result was Old Number 1, the first MG sports car. Morris Garages outgrew its home 3 times before moving to Abingdon in 1929. It was renamed the MG Car Company. Cecil Kimber's little sports car was a hit. It was exactly what the public wanted. A small, high-performance car that could be driven on the roads during the week and raced on Sundays. But most importantly, it was modestly priced. These were the early days of the Depression, and most people couldn't afford a sporty Bentley or a Mercedes. The MG Midget was the perfect solution. Despite its low cost, each MG was handmade by skilled craftsmen. Every car was tested, hand-painted, and prepared for delivery. You didn't have to wait for the car to arrive at your local dealer. MG welcomed buyers to pick up their cars from the factory. Many buyers drove straight to local rally events, where the tough little car proved itself on the most extreme terrain. The first really important racing success for MG came in 1930 at Brooklands. Built in 1908, Brooklands was the first banked concrete racetrack in the world. This 2-day event was similar to the 24-hour race at Le Mans in France. On their first outing, the tiny MGs beat the powerful Bentleys. One of the Bentley drivers was heard to say, "We've been invaded by fleas." MG continued to dominate sports car racing throughout the early 1930s. They won events like the Irish Grand Prix, the Isle of Man Tourist Trophy, and the Ulster TT. They also took home victories in Italy, Germany, Czechoslovakia, and Monaco. MG's growing reputation on the track paid off with increased sales. Racing enthusiasts would often stop by the factory to see their new cars being finished and to have a word with the men who were building them. If you were lucky, you might have a chat with famous rally drivers like Ian Appleyard before they drove off to compete in an event. The MG Midgets began to develop a following in the United States, thanks to the heirs to an advertising fortune, the Collier brothers. They started racing on their parents' New York estate in the 1930s. they built a road course and invited their friends over to race. The brothers Barron Jr., Miles and Sam had read about European road racing, and once they saw it, they had to get involved. MGs became an early favourite at their races because of Barron's wife. She saw the little cars racing at Brooklands and bought an MG as a wedding present for her husband. The Colliers and their friends had so much fun they formed the Overlook Racing Club. They spent many weekends racing around the estate. They soon started to hold events on road courses they set up throughout New England. They changed the name of their group to the Automobile Racing Club of America and started to drum up more interest in this uniquely European brand of racing. Their first event in Alexandria Bay, New York, attracted 10,000 spectators. During this time, the MG company began to focus on speed records. They built a special car called the Magic Midget. In December 1930, the Magic Midget hit 87 miles per hour, breaking rival Austin's record of 84 miles per hour. By 1932, driver George Easton was determined to break the 120-mile mark at Pendine Sands in Wales. Captain Easton describes his difficult record attempt.
We found when we got there that the place was strewn with razor shells, and I had to get the assistance of the local schoolmistress to close her school and get the children out to collect all these razor shells in baskets, and that was done. Every time the tide turned to come in, the sands I found got rather waterlogged, and that was against the maximum speed that we might otherwise have been able to attain.
Easton hit 118 miles per hour, but he was still determined to break the 120-mile mark. To do this, the EX127 was built. It was a slimmed-down version of the original Magic Midget. So slimmed down, in fact, that Easton could no longer fit in the car. Driver Burt Denley took over and broke the record. The car would eventually hit 140 on the German Autobahn before being acquired by Mercedes-Benz for study. In 1935, MG dropped a bombshell on racing fans around England. They would no longer sponsor a factory team. They said that their quest for victory and speed had served its purpose. Enough advanced ideas had been developed that could be incorporated in their production cars for years. Besides, there was no race competition left they hadn't won. But before the axe fell, the EX135 had been built. It was MG's most advanced record-breaking car, sporting a futuristic streamlined design that would later be seen on cars from Mercedes and Outer Union. For years, it was campaigned by private owners before it finally fell into the hands of Major Goldie Gardner. With a supercharged engine, Gardner piloted the EX135 to a record-breaking speed of 206 miles per hour on the Autobahn. The factory at Abingdon was also getting ready for the future with the introduction of the MG TA, the replacement for the Midget series of cars. Unfortunately, the TA wasn't received that well. And by the time the improved MG TB was unveiled, the world was at war. When the war started in 1939, the MG factory turned all its production to armaments. One of the first assignments was repairing Matilda tanks. In 1941, MG won a contract to assemble cockpits for British bombers. When the flames of war were finally extinguished, England faced a difficult challenge: how to rebuild. Prior to the outbreak of war, MG had announced the TC, the replacement for the TB. Despite the fact that the car was obviously dated, both mechanically and in appearance, the young war veterans who wanted to try their hand at rallying snatched up the cars. MG was aware that the more cars they could export, the more raw materials they would be allocated. They began a worldwide sales effort in order to earn much-needed hard currency. American GIs returning from Europe launched an MG phenomenon in the United States. Some of these young men had seen the MGs on their tours overseas and fell in love with the low-slung, fun-to-drive cars. The MGTC became very popular with drivers in the States. For many Americans, this was the first foreign car they'd ever seen. In the days after the war, there weren't many new cars available in America. Detroit had stopped production in 1942 to focus on the war effort. The cars that were available were large, unwieldy family sedans. The MGTC was the perfect antidote for the post-war blues. It was a tiny jewel of a car that handled well, got good gas mileage, and was fun to drive. The US market was very important to MG. The post-war economic boom meant that Americans could easily afford the MG, and more sales meant more resources to build new cars. The plan worked. In the car's 4-year production run, 10,000 TCs were built. More than half of those ended up in the United States. The success of the MG sparked a British car avalanche in the United States. Jaguar unveiled their new XK120, a production sports car that could hit 120 miles per hour. For the budget conscious, there was the Triumph TR2. For the more affluent enthusiast, Aston Martin offered the most luxurious, sexy sports car money could buy, the DB2. All of these cars had been developed after the war and had a decidedly modern look compared to the MGs. MG continued to build the T-Series, offering up minor updates like independent front suspension with the TD and some slight cosmetic changes on the TF. But by 1953, the MGs looked like relics. It was time to bring some excitement back to the marque. Once again, MG set its sights on speed records. This time at the Bonneville Salt Flats outside Wendover, Utah. The MG EX179 resembled the pre-war record-breaking car of Major Goldie Gardner, but it had a larger, more efficient engine. The hopes were to break a series of Class F records. After the first day, the car with Ken Miles and Johnny Lockett broke the 12-hour world speed record, clocking 141.81 miles per hour. The next day, the team went after the Class F sprint record. Officiating the event was the United States Auto Club. With Ken Miles behind the wheel, the retuned EX179 reached a record-breaking 170.15 miles per hour, almost 10 miles an hour faster than the old record. In just 2 days, the MG broke 16 international and 47 American national records. MG was also experimenting with a new streamlined design for their next generation of sports cars, the MGAs. These sexy new cars were rolled out for the first time for the 1955 Le Mans. These aluminum-bodied prototypes finished 5th and 6th in their class and heralded a new era for MG. The MGAs found their way onto the rally circuit, a mainstay of MG racing. Here, they proved that they were competent successors to the T-Series. The public couldn't wait to get their hands on this new car. Revitalized by the success of the MGA, the company launched the EX181 in 1957. It was the most advanced record-breaking car they'd ever produced. With racing legend Stirling Moss at the wheel, this all-British team set its sights on exceeding 240 miles per hour. Designed by MG engineer Sid Enever, the EX181 was unlike any MG before it. Enever was the man responsible for the MGA, and his experience with streamlining helped create a bullet-like car that promised to be the fastest MG ever built. The team returned to the Bonneville Salt Flats, where Moss piloted the car to an astounding 245 miles per hour, a record. MG was back on top. Their MGA was a hot seller. In 1958, they beefed up the power with a twin-cam version of the car. Designed for the weekend enthusiast, it could hit a top speed of 115 miles per hour. What the car lacked, however, was a comfortable interior. This would be remedied with MG's next new model, the MGB. The MGB had better performance thanks to a new 1789cc engine and far greater comfort. While it was shorter than the MGA, the designers had managed to make the cockpit roomier, which allowed for larger, more comfortable seats. The press and public loved the car. Its top speed exceeded 100 miles per hour, and it could hug the road like the MG rally cars of the past. It was the most successful MG ever produced, selling 5 times more cars than the MGA. But in 1970, the sports car market would change forever. That year, Nissan unveiled the Datsun 240Z. It hit the streets all over the world. Here was a true modern sports car. Fast, stylish, inexpensive, and something MGs never were: reliable. The cars sold faster than Nissan could make them. This would be a death sentence for MG. Production continued until 1980, when the factory was closed. It was the end of a glorious era. But the MG name would not die in the hearts of its many fans around the world. Above anything else, MGs had character. Die-hard fans loved the plucky little cars. News of MG's demise sparked a huge outcry around the world. The parent company, British Leyland, which also owned Triumph, didn't expect this. Realizing the hexagonal badge of the MG still meant something, the company made a half-hearted effort to exploit the brand. The result was the Metro series, launched in 1981. These front-wheel drive cars had little in common with the previous line of MGs. They were more mini than MG. Still, they proved to be popular enough. The Metro series marked a return to factory racing for the MG brand. The Metro 6R4 was able to produce 400 brake horsepower. It competed successfully in the unlimited B Group class for several years. But after a series of tragic accidents attributed to the speed of these cars, Group B rally racing was banned in 1987. The Metro series continued to sell well, but true MG fans were waiting for another open-topped roadster to win their hearts. Unfortunately, that roadster wouldn't be an MG. It was Mazda's retro convertible, the MX-5, or Miata. The Miata was everything that the MG roadsters had been, with one exception. They always started and didn't drip oil. The Mazda reminded everyone how much fun to drive were the classic two-seat sports cars of the 1950s and 60s. The Miata single-handedly revived the modern sports car movement. Jaguar weighed in with an updated XK convertible, reminiscent of the classic XKE. Porsche hit the road with the Boxster. With this renewed interest in small, sporty convertibles, the Rover Group, which now owned the MG name, began work on an all-new open-topped roadster, the MG-F. The new car boasted a mid-engine and rear-wheel drive. The British-designed 1789cc motor delivered a lively 118 brake horsepower. Rover claimed a top speed of 120 miles per hour and a 0 to 60 time of 8.5 seconds. The MG-F was what British sports car fans had been waiting for. It had the latest technological advances while maintaining that classic MG charm. While there were few amenities other than electric windows, a 6-CD auto-changer and air conditioning were available options. Another nice feature was the large trunk, which could accommodate 2 golf bags. While it had yet to be released in the US, the MG-F became Britain's #1 selling sports car. MG was back, and in 2000 it broadened the lineup with 3 new sports sedans, the MG ZR, ZS and the ZT. These cars gave buyers needing a back seat the same kind of driving thrill as the popular MG-F. The company was never known for building a wide variety of cars. MG finally had a model for everyone. While Rover was sold, then resold, it looked as though MG would go on forever. MG has run the gamut from perky sports cars that charm the world to races that set world records. It's a car that's always been about the feeling of going fast. There may be more advanced sports cars in the world, but there isn't one that is more fun to drive. It's all about the romance of the road.